Welcome back. Well, your power prices are soaring and could continue to rise by as much as 50% over the next 2 years. Now, that is a cold, hard fact. But now that Labor is in charge, some in the media are still refusing to do their jobs and hold power to account. The protection racket at The Guardian is running for Labor is absolutely unbelievable. This week, The Guardian Australia's political editor Katharine Murphy wrote this: soaring power bills being used as cover for more lies about renewable energy, Labor claims. And the first paragraph is a perfect example of Orwellian doublespeak that seeks to paint those worried about the cost of living crisis as liars. She writes, the climate change minister, Chris Bowen, will declare trenchant opponents of climate action in Australian politics and the media are using the cost of living crisis and soaring energy prices as cover to resume lying about the energy transition. That's not an opinion piece, if you can believe it. That's supposedly straight news reporting from an organisation always harping on about its independence and integrity. Are you concerned about what the energy transition is doing to power prices? Then you are a liar, according to this report. Now, nowhere in that partisan piece does it reference Labor's reckless and completely unachievable promise to cut power prices by $275 by 2025. If someone is lying in this situation, I don't think it's the battler in regional Australia having to monitor their air conditioning use this summer due to bill pressures. And on The Project this week, watch how Albanese tries to duck great questions from Carrie Bickmore on this issue.
Can we talk about electricity prices for the moment? They're tipped to rise 20% this year. You went to the election promising to lower them by $275 by 2025. Is that promise still alive, or have you ditched that now?
Well, what we know is that renewables are the cheapest form of new energy. And we did modelling on our policy that showed that to be the case.
And credit to co-host Waleed Ali for correcting Albanese and putting the Russia excuse to shame.
We know that there's also enormous pressure due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine has seen global power prices spike, but we also are looking at what we can do in the short term.
But that criticism what you were making before the election, the war in Ukraine had already started by the time you were saying this in the election. You're not making any guarantee on numbers. That's gone now?
No, what we know, the numbers are the energy bills will be cheaper if you have more renewables in the system and you fix transmission.
Ali was right. Labor went to the election around 3 months after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but they didn't modify their policy claims. But incredibly, ABC host Patricia Karvelis didn't interrupt Chris Bowen to remind him of that when he repeated this claim.
There is ongoing pressure on energy prices in the short term caused by the ongoing European volatility and, frankly, the deliberate decision of Vladimir Putin to weaponise energy prices and to try and make consumers in the West pay as part of his geopolitical strategy.
There is no greater issue than cost of living, and those far-left journalists need to stop running a protection for a government which made some pretty bold promises at the election. Kosher, what are your thoughts on how this whole energy crisis is playing out in the Australian media? Do you think journalists are holding Labor properly to account for these bold promises they made prior to the polls closing?
Absolutely not. And I think, Jack, this is a case study in just where the profession of journalism is, as you cover every week, where we are just squarely past a reporting or investigative phase of the profession, and it's all about ideology and advocacy, and anyone paying attention can see that. The advocacy and ideology here is that the environmental topic, which has been massively politicized, is a central tenet of the left. For a couple of reasons. One is it sells. You know, it's easy to talk about things, or it's more fun to talk about things like saving the planet and looking after the polar bears and, you know, everything that's happening, as opposed to boring things like cost of living and the price of oil per barrel, etc. The other thing is it's a useful instrument. It takes advantage of and really exploits good people's desire to conserve and save the planet and, you know, do the right thing to go after what this is really about, which is it is a political scheme that supports the growth of government, greater reliance on government, transfer of wealth from one sector to another, from rich countries to poor countries. That's what it's about, but it's easy to wrap it up in an issue that has sort of a moralistic framework.
Yeah, and Daisy, the really scary thing to me is this proposition being put forward by some journalists that you're a liar if you question policy. I thought that was our job. I thought journalists were supposed to scrutinise policy, pick it apart and show the public what it really meant. To characterise people that are doing that forensically as lying, kind of this quasi-misinformation label, to me that's everything that's wrong with the media right now.
Well, it shows how desperate they are, Jack. They're so completely desperate. This is so embarrassing from the Renewable Energy Brigade and for Labor and Labor's supporters in the media. I mean, the $275 thing was a massive election promise. Waleed was correct to say they were pushing this while the war in Ukraine was going on, so that's no excuse. Now this is all blown up very quickly in their faces. There's a lot of people who are going to be left, dare I say, with egg on their faces, so that it's a very desperate ploy by the Guardian to sort of cast their political opponents as somehow bereft or lying or deficient in some way, but rather than acknowledging that no, that is what journalists are supposed to do, look through policies forensically, but they don't want them looked through forensically, because if they're looked through forensically, they will be found wanting.